Hi guys, it's Joel again. I wanted to add another video, just talking about some of my weird experiences with the supernatural realm. And one of my first experiences that I've ever had, man. I was 4 years old. I was living in a little town called Collinsville in Oklahoma, and it was a normal day. I can remember that, sun was shining and all that stuff. Well, that night, whenever, uh, it was time for us kids to go to bed, me and my two younger brothers were all sleeping in the same room, and we lived in a trailer park. Well, what had happened was, as we climbed up in bed and all that stuff, one of my younger brothers was on the left side of me in his bed, and my other brother was in his crib. Well, what had happened was, mom tucked us in, said goodnight, all that stuff. And, you know, I had this little blue blanket that I used to cover myself up with. And mom had kissed us all goodnight and everything. Well, her and dad were going back down the hallway. My dad, he put a black light in the hallway so it'd keep down on the incandescent color of the light. So because I was scared of the dark, man. And they left the bedroom door open, and as they made their way to their room to go to bed, man, they turned off the living room lights, kitchen lights, their hallway light, and finally shut their door and went to sleep. Well, both my younger brothers were fast asleep. For some reason, I was still up, and I can remember that I took my sheet and covered my head with it. Well, this blue sheet, man, I could still see down the hallway. And as I was staring down the hallway, this black being just floated down through the living room, out of the darkness of the living room, down the hallway, and stopped at like the threshold of my door. The being was it was so dark, it had no color in it at all, and I could see the outline of him. It looked like he had a hood on with some kind of cloak draped around him. Well, all of a sudden, two more beings came out of him. One went to the left side of the room, one went to the right side of the room, and they just stood there. Now, as they were standing there, I was, looking at these beings, and I knew that they knew that I was awake. So the being that was still in the doorway, we had this little shelf, or not shelf, it was more like it was a stand-up dresser, and I remember him taking like his arm and just touching it and moving it forward. I don't, it could have been about 30 degrees or so, but none of the drawers fell out. And as I'm laying there staring at this thing, I'm like, man, what is going on? 4 years old, thinking to myself, I wasn't scared or anything. I was just thinking, man, what is going on here? Because, 4 years new to this world. I mean, God called us all into this place, into His reality, man. Basically, called us here for Him. So I'm staring at this thing. It's looking back at me. The two other ones are looking at me. They know I'm awake. I'm underneath the sheet. He takes the dresser, tips it forward, then leans it back against the wall. And then it's like somehow these two other beings knew it was time to leave. So they just floated back into this being and disappeared. Then all of a sudden, the being didn't turn around or anything, man. He just floated straight backwards into the darkness of the living room, and he was gone. Maybe about another 3 minutes, I fell asleep. Well, the next morning I woke up. I tried to tell my mom and dad, what I'd seen, and they just kind of blew it off as if I had a bad dream. Well, here's my thoughts on that is I'm 4 years old, never watched a scary movie in my life because my parents were Christian, newly saved Christians, so they didn't watch horror movies or anything like that. How in the world is a 4-year-old going to dream about a black figure coming into his bedroom? There's no logic in that. So, right then I knew that, this was something different. Now, praise God, I believe that Jesus was standing right next to me, man. Or it could have been his angels, man. And it was keeping this demon at bay. Or the devil, whatever you want to call it, death. It was keeping him at bay. All three of them. And that is the very first experience I've ever had. The next experience, I was in the same trailer. Me and my brother were running down the hallway to go get in bed. It was probably around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I opened up the door real quick, and I seen this green ball hovering in the middle of the bedroom. And then it's like it noticed me and my younger brother, and it just zipped out the window real quick. I mean, it was like an iridescent green, and it was just floating there. And as it noticed us, it just kind of did this like little spiral thing and just flew out the window, and it was gone. That's the second thing that happened to me. Third thing that happened to me, I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. It was during a flood. I think it was in 1986. And I was at my grandparents' house, and my grandma had the back door open. Well, I went to the threshold of the door, and I looked around. I think I was about 5 years old. And I looked around down the side of the house. Well, all of a sudden, I seen this black figure that was probably about 8-9 foot tall. And he just, he didn't have a cloak on or nothing like that. You could see it was like the outline of, it looked like a man, but real skinny. Real tall, but well proportioned. So then I looked down the outside of the house, and I seen him step around, and he just stared at me. And I looked at him like, what in the world is this? Again, I'm not scared, dude. 5 years old, So I just kind of, looked at him like, what the heck, what are you? So then I kind of went in the house, and I tried to get, one of the adults to come and look at this thing. Well, nobody, they just said imagination. And it's like, okay, again, man, you're 5 years old. I've never seen a horror movie, that had anything like this in it. So, why am I seeing this? So at this point, I believe it's normal for me to see this kind of stuff, man. I thought everybody's seen this kind of stuff. And that was the third experience I had. Fourth experience I had was I was about 8 years old, 9 years old, and I was living actually in my grandparents' old house because they had rented it out to my parents. And I'm walking home from a friend's house this night, and I walked past another friend's house on my block. Well, he had a tree in front of his house, and as I was getting closer and closer to his house, walking down the sidewalk, I noticed this like head. It was just pitch black head, like peeking out around this tree. And I got closer to it, and I thought it was, my buddy's older brother going to try to jump out and scare me. Well, I get closer and closer, and it's just peeking out around this head, or around the tree with its head. And I'm thinking, okay, man, this must be, my buddy's older brother. He's going to jump out and scare me. Well, I get up to the tree, nothing happens, and I'm like, hey, Bobby, what are you doing? Then all of a sudden, this black figure there was no depth to his face. It was just complete darkness, man. Looks out around the tree at me, and I took off running. I mean, it scared the bejeebus out of me. So that was my fourth encounter with, these devils, man. That's what they are, the demons, man. Fallen angels, whatever you want to call them. So that was some of the very first stuff that ever happened to me with demons. Now, I've seen angels too, man, and I'll make some videos about that. Well, I think that's pretty good for this video right now. Thank you guys for listening, man. If you have any questions, comments, just post them below, dude. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. I work, so I'm not doing this for you guys to monetize me or anything like that, dude. I mean, I'm just sharing my testimony about the stuff that Jesus has allowed me to see in this world. So that's it. Thank you.